This is an answer to misleading testimony concerning Acquisition Project 184, presented as a petition to the Armed Services Committees of the Congress from the citizens of Wading River, New York, who are concerned over plans which affect their land, their homes, and their livelihood.
We are your petitioners, the citizens of Wading River, coming together for Sunday worship at our two community churches, Protestant and Catholic. You have been told by the Navy that the land to be frozen, our land, is sparsely populated, quote, agricultural, out in the open, unquote. We think this gathering speaks for itself. Would you find an outpouring such as this one in an area described as largely scrub oak and potato land? This is part of what we mean by misleading testimony, what we hope to correct in this film, which we financed and which the Wading River Civic Association made it cost. Our Protestant church has a new youth center, a new addition to the rectory. All this we built on borrowed money, on the assumption that church membership would continue to grow. Yet, you have also been told that we welcome keeping the population out, that there is negligible local opposition to Project 184, which would stifle our future growth. We scarcely consider our opposition negligible. If we could, more than 90% of us would come to Washington to ask you, the representatives of the people, to protect our constitutional rights, to prevent a misuse of the taxpayers' money. But we know you're busy people. We're working people too. And we felt the best way to speak to you was through this collective answer to the pictorial exhibit of maps and charts presented by Grumman and the Navy.
Here are the geographical facts of the situation. Here is Wading River, Long Island, less than 60 miles from the boundaries of greater New York City. Total area, 5,000 acres. Here is the Grumman leased plant on the Peconic River. Total area, some 4,500 acres. Leased exclusively for the assembling and testing of jet fighter planes. Planes designed to land and take off on the 1,000-foot-long flight decks of Navy carriers. Compare the existing Grumman leased acreage with the total area of New York's International Airport. That big commercial airport has only 530 acres more than Grumman, yet Idlewild is equipped to handle jet transports. Grumman's 10,000-foot runway, incidentally, is already longer than any at Idlewild. The 45,000 acres was enough for Grumman and the Navy when the original land was condemned and taken only 5 years ago. But today, Grumman claims it needs an additional 21,710 acres, this vast buffer zone, which takes in 1/3 of the township of Riverhead, of which Wading River is a part. A buffer zone 1.5 times as large as all of Manhattan Island. The Navy has told you it can take all this land with a minimum of interference with private enterprise and local administrations. The citizens of Wading River would keep their land, but would not be allowed to develop it. The Navy would control it in perpetuity forever. Control assignable to Grumman by the Navy should the land be considered surplus to national defense. The Riverhead Town Board, the Suffolk County Board of Supervisors, the citizens of Wading River call this a maximum of interference, a minimum of rights, a minimum of freedom.
Wading River was settled by some of America's first seekers after freedom, the Pilgrims. That was in 1671. If you were to drive by, you might think this is all that remains of our historic town, a deceptively small-looking community. It is our community center, where we come to shop for groceries and to pick up our mail. But the mail that arrives at this post office is addressed to more than 5,000 people, many of them descendants of our earliest settlers. Ours is a rambling town. Let us show you just a few of our historic homes, treasured by their owners, preserved and restored almost as shrines. The proud date and the aging wisteria, part of our heritage from man and from nature. Because some of our families settled here a long time ago, Grumman has described us as rugged individualists who resent newcomers. Well, this is our oldest restored home. Notice the original handmade shingles, the small paned, hand-blown glass windows. This house served as Wading River's first Sunday school, its first post office. Rugged individualism was the inheritance of Mrs. Emily Miller Bruin, age 79, whose great-grandfather built this home.
I'm Emily Miller Bruin. I live in Wading River. I lived in the house that my great-grandfather built in 1799. I am very fond of the home. I'm very fond of all the contents. I'm very keen about the properties that we have here and the properties that we have sold to others to come and make their homes here. In fact, it's something that we think about practically all the time. I do. It's in the back of my mind, and always. And the last thing at night, the first thing in the morning, and when I wake up and say, well, I just say a prayer asking the Lord to take care of us. And now I'm hoping you will too.
Certainly no resentment of newcomers from all of us whose ancestors were newcomers to this land. Immigrants of colonial days who fought with George Washington, immigrants of later years who fought in later wars. Certainly as their descendants, as citizens, we would make any sacrifice necessary to preserve our national freedom, our national security.
My name is Ed Lapham. I live in Wading River on land which was settled by my ancestors over 200 years ago. I'm a veteran and believe that our country should have a strong national defense as a protection against the enemy. However, I do not believe that this proposal, which would put a blight on our entire community forever, is necessary. I know that in other places, the Air Force and the Navy has obtained navigation easements which prevent buildings being erected over a certain height. I'm sure that this is a very good idea. However, I do not believe that the proposed restrictions in this area, which would in effect prevent all future building of any kind whatsoever, have any relation at all to our national defense. I sincerely hope that the Armed Services Committee will reject the Grumman Navy proposal so that a more sensible solution of this problem may be achieved.
Ed Lapham speaks of navigation easements, restrictions on the height of our homes, the sort of restrictions asked for by the Air Force to ensure the safety of their jet interceptor pilots at nearby West Hampton. Look at our homes once again. We have no desire to build skyscrapers. As a matter of fact, if you flew over Wading River, you would see few of these homes because of the trees. The homeowners of Wading River would readily grant the Navy navigation easements, but we're being asked to cease building altogether and forever. Here are some of the reasons why we think that's an unwarranted hardship. Consider the future of the farmer, and there is some potato land in Wading River. Scientifically farmed, well-kept potato land. Under the Navy plan, farmers may build silos, fences, barns, but no additional farmhouses. What happens if the farmer wants to subdivide his land among his sons? Must they all live together with their wives and children in one house? Will this encourage future generations to stay on the farm? Will this, as Grumman promises, protect the agricultural economy? You are looking, by the way, at the land of a fortunate farmer. Others, forced to sell their land to the Navy 5 years ago, are now renting from Grumman. Others received such small compensation from the so-called fair courts that they could neither rent nor buy elsewhere. Still others, some who could afford to fight for a fair price, are still awaiting due process of law. We have our potato land, and we also have some scrub oak. This strip is on the edge of the Grumman leased property. Consider the problem it poses. If this land cannot be developed, who would hold on to it and continue to pay taxes? And if sold for taxes, who would want to buy it except Grumman? Grumman pays no local taxes, so we, the taxpayers of Wading River, would have to take on the extra tax load. Bill Miller, another member of our Wading River's oldest families, is concerned about that, and about the differences between the assessed and the real value of our more developed land.
I'm William L. Miller of Wading River. I've lived here in Wading River for the past 50 years. I've been engaged in the real estate and insurance business here for practically the whole of that time. I myself and the residents of Wading River are very much disturbed about the Navy Grumman takings in this area on account of the tax situation. A great deal of the property in this area is woodland and other property that is excellent for residential use, but is not good or of any use for farming purposes and could not be used for farms if it was cleared up. This would result in a great deal of this property being given up by the present owners, and it would pass into tax-exempt property, which would very greatly increase the taxes of the remainder of the property in the town. I'd like to state that there are in the township of Riverhead at the present time over 6,070 acres of exempt property. I would like also to call attention to the difference in assessed values and sales values. I've investigated sales made for the past 2 or 3 years here in this area, and I have found that the sale prices have run between 4 and 5 times their assessed value. And if the Navy has figured that $15 million will cover all of the property taken over in this area, we consider it's very greatly less than the actual value of the property on account of the difference between the sales and the assessed value. We feel that the actual cost of taking of that property would be near 3 or 4 times the $15 million.
This is another kind of oak, white oak, 275 years old, 6th largest tree on Long Island. It stands on the kind of property Ed Miller is talking about, some of the most valuable land in the entire country. The oak belongs to this house, the home of Charlie Wood, architect and developer. Grumman has told you that developers moved into Wading River after their plant was built. Well, the Wood's eldest son has enjoyed this rural backyard for all of his 16 years. And Sally Wood's ancestors moved into Wading River in 1880. 9 years ago, the Woods bought 90 acres. That was 4 years before Grumman came to Wading River. They started to build 2 years before Grumman arrived. Certainly not because of Grumman, but because of the natural growth of Suffolk County. Charlie gets $2,000 an acre. For Navy appropriation averages out to $700 an acre for rows of condemned lots. The Woods sell only by acres. They're all for zoning, but not for zoning under slave conditions. And why the need for this slave zoning? Grumman says it must prevent this sort of housing development. This is Levittown, near the Grumman plant at Bethpage. But what Grumman fails to make clear is that Bethpage is a lot closer to New York City than we are. And this gigantic housing development accommodates mostly commuters. Does this development look like Levittown? 150 houses here. Levittown has more than 10,000. The estimate given to you of all the buildings in the proposed buffer area would be more nearly accurate, if doubled. But compared with Levittown, these are literally 2x4 developments. And Wading River will stay this way so long as commuting to New York involves roughly 5 hours of travel on the bumpy, erratic Long Island Railroad. Do not mistake us. Our land is not mostly open countryside, as you have been told. Suffolk County is the fastest growing community on the eastern seaboard. But this is not suburbia. We have summer visitors, and we have locally employed permanent residents, most of them here long before Grumman arrived, but no city commuters. In fact, we'd bet that the guided missile replaces the jet fighter plane before our trains manage to get us in and out of New York on time. And that raises a more serious question. Why a permanent halt to the construction of low-lying cottages like these, if, from what we read in the papers, the guided missile may really replace the jet fighter plane in a few years' time, the way it's happening already in Britain? What use then for the Navy obtain Grumman assignable easements in perpetuity on our land? And not only our land is affected. Did you know that not 1 but 2 Boy Scout camps also lie within the so-called safety or buffer area? In fact, the borders of this particular camp are within 1/2 mile of the Grumman runway. Grumman spokesman assures us that these scouts will not be disturbed, that the 5,000 Boy Scouts who camp out in Wading River each summer are in no danger from the fast-flying jet fighter planes. Why then the implication that our homes 2 or 3 miles away from Grumman are in danger? Why the need to put a building blight on our land? If taken literally, the Navy easements could put a stop to even this kind of construction, as no residential buildings are to go up. Even now, our banks have stopped issuing mortgages. To build at all, you need cash. Is this a minimum of interference with private enterprise? No fireworks allowed in Camp Wildwood. a state-run picnicking and camping site for vacationing families. No fireworks allowed, but none of us are sure whether these youngsters are in danger of falling jets or whether, like the scouts, they will not be disturbed by such hazards. Some of us have heard that the campground will be cut in half by the easement restrictions. Others, that these playgrounds are entirely outside the buffer area. Just one example of the conflicting reports and the secrecy surrounding this test project. We've heard a lot and have seen the Navy announcement, but we have yet to learn the wording of the actual easements to be inflicted. The rural charm of our land has brought us not only a state park, but also a Catholic home for the caring and schooling of orphans from Brooklyn, and a Protestant summer camp, a woodland playground, and of course, a chance to swim. You are now looking at the most expensive land at Wading River. Beachfront property sells for $75 a waterfront foot, as much as $12,000 an acre. 4 miles of it are to be included in Project 184 to extend the buffer zone to Long Island Sound. We cannot help but wonder if our very expensive land is even a good buy. Even if $15 million could adequately compensate us for freezing valuable property, which it obviously can't, wouldn't $1 million of the taxpayers' money buy much more in an undeveloped inland area, where land values are measured in 2 or 3 figures, not 4 or 5? We cannot show you the Grumman plant for good and solid reasons, but its location here raises other perplexing questions in our minds. Located next door to Route 25, northern Long Island's main east-west artery, Grumman and the Navy want to relocate this highway, meaning at least temporary dislocation of the traffic pattern in an area jammed with defense facilities, not to mention the loss of $100,000 investment to the owner of this motel. About a mile from Grumman on Route 25, you would spot this sign, and we could show you some of the 300 homes in this Lake Panamoka resort development. Could tell you that the fishermen may be talking more about raising local taxes than the big one that got away if these easements go through. But what concerns us, what perplexes us, is what lies directly across Lake Panamoka. The Brookhaven Atomic Laboratory, right on the edge of the buffer zone, in which the Navy says 1/3 of all crashes occur. Can jet crashes be confined that closely to a map? Or is this dead-end street symbolic of a double warning? A warning to us of our fate if these easements are approved. But of greater importance, the need to dead-end this vulnerable area to any further crush of defense installations.
Let's re-examine the facts of geography from the point of view of defense. Long Island, famous for its ducks, is itself a sitting duck for an enemy bomb, listed not once but twice by the Civil Defense Administration as a top H-bomb target. Once because of the nearness of New York City, and consider that all Grumman supplies are funneled through New York City. What would happen to the plant in an emergency if New York City were knocked out? The headlines also refer, however, to the Riverhead area, to this very section of Long Island where Grumman is located, a top H-bomb target. And here, as we pointed out, is one reason why. Brookhaven National Laboratory, World Center for Atomic Research, located 3 miles from the Grumman plant, almost within the proposed safety zone. That's Brookhaven's atomic chimney there in the distance. Grumman had to move one of its runways some years ago, a runway that originally was directed straight at Brookhaven's atomic pile. On either side of Grumman are located RCA long-wave and short-wave transmitters, the largest commercial transmitting field in the world. And this is what just a part of it looks like. There are between 300 and 400 transmission towers altogether. And in this area where pilot safety is an issue, the 6 long-wave towers used by AT&T are 400 feet high. A Nike installation also in the nearby vicinity, and also an Army rifle range. And the Suffolk County Air Base at West Hampton, jet interceptor base for the protection of New York City and the entire metropolitan area. Supersonic F-102As operate out of West Hampton, yet the Air Force is content with some 1,700 acres and navigation easements over another 777 acres for a jet interceptor base for the protection of New York City. That's 1/10 the size, the safety expansion requested by Grumman for the assembling and testing of Navy jet fighter planes. Time magazine notes that when the original Peconic River move was made 5 years ago, The Navy tried to dissuade Grumman from moving into this crowded Long Island area to settle instead at a less vulnerable inland site.
This editorial in our local newspaper appeared May 2nd and said, "The Battle of the Peconic River is proving to be almost as fierce as any land engagement the United States Navy has yet undertaken." This headline appeared on April 18th after one of our town meetings. A precedent, we think, for reaction in other parts of the country if this revolutionary method of halting natural growth is attempted in other populated areas. Some of our citizens up in arms gathered at our firehouse, which also serves as the meeting place of our civic association, to personally ask for your help in protecting our rights under the Constitution, and to tell you how they feel personally.
My name is J. Wilson Stout. I am one of the assessors in the town of Riverhead. I have served the town in that capacity for the past 16 years. I have also been actively engaged in the real estate business for more than the 20 years last past. I feel that I have a fairly good knowledge of the real estate lying in the town of Riverhead affected by the proposed easement. We are informed that the proposed taking will include about 14,000 acres in Riverhead, which constitutes nearly one-third of the entire area of the town. The remaining 8,000 acres lies in the neighboring town of Brookhaven. We are informed that the Navy is seeking an appropriation by Congress of $15 million with which to acquire the proposed easement. It has been admitted by representatives of the Navy that the estimate arrived at was a sort of quickie and was not based upon actual appraisal. After considerable thought and a cursory examination of the records, I am of the opinion that an appropriation of twice that amount would not be sufficient to fairly and justly compensate the owners of the real estate affected. From a tax point of view, the effect of such easements upon the financial structure of the town would be serious indeed. The area affected is destined to tremendous growth in development, and to interfere with this natural growth would be most unfair and unwise.
My name is Mrs. John Bierman. I am opposed to the Grumman Navy Project 184 because it encumbers the title of my property. This condition would be permanent, making my place unsaleable. I would be left in the position of paying higher taxes on a home I would own in name only. As a widow, I have carefully planned toward security, and this condition would be greatly undermined. I consider the project unfair and certainly un-American.
My wife and I have worked 10 years to start to own our own home. We feel that under the Bill 184 that we will be sharing our ownership with Grumman, which we don't want to do.
I am against the Grumman Navy Project 184 because it seems to be more for private enterprise than for national defense. This is unconstitutional by its very nature.
I'm Frank Vanicki, disabled veteran. I live in Wading River, and I work for the town of Riverhead as a policeman. I'm building a house in Wading River 5 miles away from the Grumman Calverton plant. I understand Grumman wants air easements over my property. These easements would greatly depreciate my property. Thank you. I'm against Grumman Navy Project 184 because it creates a precedent for all future land grabs by any manufacturer having a military tie-in.
I'm against the Grumman Navy Project because it not only destroys our business, but it jeopardizes the tremendous investment that we have made in our home here in Wading River. We are therefore being denied the privilege of moving elsewhere to find a new business. I just simply can't believe that such a thing is happening in Wading River, in this great country of ours.
I'm against the Grumman Navy Project 184 because Grumman is said to hold the option to buy all easements or rights if the Navy decides to dispose of them.
I am against Grumman Navy Project 184 because the property it takes off the tax rolls will obviously greatly increase my taxes.
I own a home in Wading River and would not care to have any restrictions placed on the same. Nevertheless, if it's for national defense, I won't stand in the way if it's absolutely necessary.
I am against Project 184 because Grumman Navy, while stressing safety, uses the Calverton field for checking out pilots and co-pilots on four-motored commercial airliners on the same runways with their Navy jets.
Alex Horton of Montevideo, age 42, born in Montevideo, excavating contractor and farmer. I object to this project because I don't think it's for national defense. The time that we had the first taking, we wasn't treated fair, and none of our neighbors were. We paid $300 a year taxes, and when Grumman took over, we paid $1,700 a year rent to Grumman, which they didn't pay any taxes at all.
I'm against Grumman Navy Project 184 because materials for the manufacture of Navy planes must come through the bottleneck of the New York area or by even poorer communication systems. This is plainly silly for a national defense facility.
I object to the Grumman Navy Project 184 as an American citizen whose descendants came over on the Mayflower One looking for freedom. It will be impossible to settle my estate with permanent restrictions and easements clouding the title.
It's my opinion this Grumman plant is foolishly placed. As Admiral Radford has stated, an enemy submarine can come within 500 miles of our coast and fire a guided missile into this plant due to its proximity to the ocean.
I am against Grumman Navy Project 184 because it opens the way for Congress to sign any number of blank checks for similar purposes.
My name is Reuben Ryan, and I am owner of the motel you have just seen. This is a well-constructed brick and masonry building and represents a very substantial investment. If the Navy request for restrictions is granted, it will seriously affect my business. If Route 25 is diverted, it will ruin my business completely, as well as that of several neighboring businesses, including another motel. Such a diversion would also materially retard the growth of the entire east end of Long Island, as it would, in effect, virtually cut in half the island on this north shore by making access increasingly more difficult. This would work a hardship of endless proportion on thousands of persons in this area, and is certainly not warranted under these peacetime conditions. The House Armed Services Committee, upon inspection, could readily see that Long Island is definitely too small and much too valuable for other purposes to have such a tremendous tract laid waste under these restrictions. The committee should thoroughly investigate the alleged need for defense in this case, where the sole tenant has an option to buy, and 90% of the aircraft using this field at the present time are strictly commercial, such as Pan American, TWA, Braniff, and others. Almost no one in this area favors the plan. Every reasonable person feels the proposition is unwise from a military as well as economic point of view. And a look at the broader picture from Riverhead banker William Attlee.
This bank holds a deposit of 21,000 people. We have these deposits invested in $9 million of mortgages in this area and over 300,000 in the affected area. We cannot either take or keep mortgages except upon unencumbered real property. If these restrictive covenants are imposed, we must get out of this area. 1/3 of the township of Riverhead is involved. There is no precedent for such a plan. This would have a serious impact upon the community.
This ends our pictorial petition. And with these signatures, nearly 2,000 of them, we ask you to consider whether Acquisition Project 184 is necessary, whether it is a prudent use of the taxpayers' money, whether these vast and unprecedented restrictive easements assignable to a private corporation are justified by the interests of national defense. We are loyal and patriotic Americans, but we're also frightened Americans. We stand to lose materially through land values already dropping on the strength of rumors, through the prospect of substantially increased local taxes. But we're more concerned with the principle involved. We cannot believe that the Navy power of seizure can be used in peacetime to give a private profit-making industry the opportunity to control and stifle our development of our land in perpetuity forever. We thank you for listening to us.